Hey guys, Britt here. Welcome to End Times Bible Prophecy. Make sure to hit the subscribe, like, and share buttons. Well, it's happening exactly as we thought it would. What am I talking about? I'm talking about the energy crisis in the European Union. And despite what the media would have us believe, the crisis has not been averted simply because there's a mild winter and we've seen declines from the all-time highs per megawatt hour and natural gas and electricity cost. The structural problems, the structural energy problems in Europe have not been fixed. It's a long winter ahead, and there's another winter to follow next year if they do not address these problems and fix them. And just as we said would happen, the politicians are acting in a way that's going to cause the problem to get worse. So we're going to look at some news stories today that will shed some light on that. But I think all of this, we're going to get to how this relates to Bible prophecy specifically at the end. So first, let's start with this article here. This is from oilprice.com. It says, worst of Europe's energy crisis may be yet to come. In December, the International Energy Agency warned that Europe could face a gas shortage this year despite its successful efforts to fill up storage for winter 2022 to 2023. Now, more voices are joining the warnings as reality sets in, and it is not a reality that one can easily brush aside. For starters, much of Europe's success in keeping the lights on so far this winter has been the result of milder than usual winter weather. October and half of November were particularly warm, which made reducing gas consumption across the European Union a mandatory directive much easier than it would have been otherwise. Yet, the moment the weather got colder in late November, consumption jumped. So in early December, Germany's head of energy market regulations had to warn Germans to take it easy on the heating as they were not hitting the country's gas savings target of 20% of total consumption. That warning gave everyone a taste of just how precarious the situation is. Storage units are full, and there's more LNG coming into European terminals all the time thanks to the weather. Reuters' John Kemp reported that the level of gas storage in Europe at the end of December was at the second highest for that time of year for the past 10 years, and set to remain comfortable until the end of the heating season, according to traders. Many were quick to celebrate the end of the crisis, but those celebrations may have been premature. To begin with, winter is far from over, and there is still a considerable likelihood of much colder weather in January and February. Besides, the end of winter does not automatically mean an abundance of natural gas. Last year, European countries managed to stock up on gas in time and in abundance, in no small part thanks to the fact that Russia sent most of its regular volumes of gas during the first half of the year. Except for the cutoff of Bulgaria and Poland for their refusal to pay in rubles, gas supply from Europe's then largest supplier remained largely steady. This helped a lot, along with the record intake of U.S. liquefied natural gas. This year, however, there will be no regular Russian gas volumes. Indeed, Moscow, in the face of Deputy Prime Minister Alexander Novak, said it is ready to resume flows along the Yamal-European pipeline, which he said remains closed for political reasons. Yet the European Union has repeatedly stated it does not want to increase its imports of Russian gas. Instead, it wants to cut them to zero eventually. And this means it will need to seriously increase its imports of LNG from not only the United States, but from all other suppliers with uncontracted volumes. And because these still available volumes are not exactly unlimited, experts are beginning to warm their audience up for another difficult year. And I want to stop on that for a second. Yes, the liquefied natural gas is coming, but it's much more expensive than pipeline gas. You have to convert it, you have to liquefy it, then you have to turn it back into a gas when it gets to its destination. It has to be shipped at great cost. So this does not solve the cost problem. It may solve problems in terms of shortages and will we have gas at all. But in terms of the high prices that are impacting consumers and businesses, this does not solve that problem, no matter how much liquefied natural gas you receive. The availability of gas would be the biggest reason why the year would likely be difficult for Europe, but even if winter continues to be mild and ends mild, the gas crisis will not be over. Here we go, because LNG is more expensive than pipeline gas, and this is a fact that does not stand to change. And this fact means that even if there is enough LNG to refill Europe's storage, which is questionable, and the IEA is warned, the bill will be huge for a second year in a row. A high gas import bill is problematic for European economies, especially the ones that have a well-developed, heavy industry, which tends to be also heavy gas users. The first red flags appeared last year. Much of the gas consumption decline in Germany that was praised by politicians actually came from demand destruction among industrial users because of prohibitive prices. So what does that mean? That's a nice way of saying the cost of doing business was so high, they either curtailed business activities or they completely shut down altogether. So that's not good. Lowering your energy usage by shutting down your economy, not employing people, not generating productivity, that's not a good trade-off. It says, in other words, gas demand in much of Europe last year fell because it was destroyed and not so much because everyone suddenly became conscientious with their gas use. But demand destruction is not good for the economy. It means shutdowns of factories and layoffs. And this means that this year Europe will be walking a tightrope between keeping its economy going and securing its gas supply for the next heating season. It will be a risky walk. And I say, no, they're not walking a tightrope. They're walking a plank off the side of a ship, like the old pirate ships used to do, not a tightrope. There is no path available anymore with the Nord Stream pipelines destroyed. The only way to get the sufficient gas supplies anytime in the next 3 to 5 years that they need is more, they can hope to build more infrastructure if the politicians would sign on to that, which they're not doing. But the only way to get the gas they need is by importing this liquefied natural gas at a much higher cost. That means electricity prices, natural gas prices will remain elevated for that timeline. Now think, if you're a business or you're thinking about opening a business in Europe, would you do that knowing that, well, we don't really know what our energy costs are going to be. We don't know how reliable the energy will be. Will we always have electricity? Will they have rolling blackouts? Will they put a cap on our usage? You know what? If we go to this other country, they don't have those problems. So the businesses will be built, the new businesses will be put, those new production facilities will be put in other countries with more reliable, inexpensive energy relative to Europe. And the existing production facilities are going to move away. And in the meantime, we've already seen how restaurants and family businesses can't afford these electricity bills, these energy bills, and they've been shutting down left and right. So again, I've said this is really ground zero for the global depression that is coming. Now there's a follow-on article. This one is from Summit News. It says, Austrian defense minister warns Europeans are unprepared for days-long blackouts. Again, despite what the media says, this crisis is far from over. It says the Austrian defense minister has warned that Europeans could face blackouts that go on for days, leaving 1/3 of citizens unable to supply themselves. Claudia Tanner made the comments during an interview with German news outlet Die Welt. The question is not whether the blackout will come, but when it will come, said Tanner, blaming the war in Ukraine. Of course, they love to blame the war in Ukraine, and I'm not saying that isn't having an impact, but ultimately it's the policies that were put in place. If more resilient energy policies had been put in place, the war in Ukraine wouldn't have an impact on Europe's ability to supply itself with energy. So this is on the politicians. This is on the decisions that were made leading up to the Ukraine war and were made following the Ukraine war, and saying we're not going to import any more Russian natural gas or fossil fuels. We're going to cut ourselves off from that, but not having adequate replacement. It says for Putin, hacking attacks on Western power supplies are a tool of hybrid warfare. We must not pretend that this is just a theory. We must be prepared for blackouts in Austria and Europe, she added. Austrian armed forces are set to establish 100 self-sufficient barracks by 2025 that are capable of sustaining themselves for a minimum of 2 weeks if energy supplies are seriously disrupted. Tanner spoke to how unprepared Europeans were for crippling, elongated blackouts by warning 1/3 of citizens would not be able to supply themselves on the 4th day of a blackout at the latest. So guys, if you live in Europe, make sure you have enough supplies for at least a couple of weeks, if not longer. Make sure you have food on hand. Make sure you have candles. Make sure you have what you need to wait out losing power, losing energy supplies, losing utilities for some period of time, whatever you want to prepare for. But she's saying here on day 4, 1/3 of Europeans would be out of those supplies and unable to do what they need to do. And of course, those people are going to be crying for government to come help. Come help us. Come fix this problem. The problem they created to begin with. But don't worry, the politicians, of course, they have their solution to this, and their solution isn't to build out more energy, but to bail out consumers and bail out industries by printing currency, which is exactly what we said they would do. This article is from Zero Hedge. From just last week, it says, Spain is latest to announce billions in inflation relief stimmies. First, it was that world-renowned incubator of policy idiocy, California, that decided that the best way to fight stimulus-driven inflation was with more stimulus, announcing this summer that it would send out up to $1,050 in inflation relief checks, in the process, of course, making inflation even worse. Then it was Italy's turn to announce in August that it would also inject billions in fresh stimulus to, wait for it, fight inflation, the same inflation that was the result of billions in fresh stimulus during the COVID pandemic, and which has led to the worst global recession and bear market since Lehman. And since stupidity is contagious, today Spain became the latest country to unveil some 10 billion euros worth of measures to ease the pain of inflation in its third major package this year, bringing total aid to 45 billion euros since early 2022. So guys, this is exactly what we said they would do. So following the lockdowns in 2020, this caused all of this inflation. That is the result of all of this inflation. Because what they did was they caused a hard stop of the economy. A lot of the energy supplies, oil wells were capped. You can't just turn those on like a light switch, on and off, on and off. It's very expensive. It's very time consuming to cap these wells, to then bring them back online for production. You're not going to do that until you know that the demand is there consistently at the price that's profitable to do so. So it caused this disruption that caused a supply side problem with energy that led to a lot of this inflation. But then on top of that, a lot of governments instituted these policies for stimulus checks, free food, and you don't have to pay your rent or your mortgage for the next year. You don't have to pay your student loans. Here's some more checks. Here, all of these different programs where they spread the cash around, and you give people cash that they didn't earn through productive endeavors, and you're paying people not to produce. You're shutting down production and then increasing the amount of currency. You're going to get inflation, and that's what we're going to see more of here. The political reaction to all of this is going to be exactly what we're seeing here with Spain and Italy and California, is they're going to hand out free cash to those who are burdened by the inflationary policies that have been put in place to begin with. And so we're going to see more and more of this because we are heading into, I believe, a global depression. It's coming. Exactly when, the timing, I'm not sure. I think it's this year. And I think Europe is ground zero. I think there's global problems. There's problems financially in China, the United States, Europe, Canada, Australia, all over the place. This can't be escaped. Eventually, the bill comes due. And as we saw in these previous articles, this is all causing these European businesses to have to shut down. And so people are going to be laid off. And if it was hard to pay electricity bills before, if it was hard to pay those utility bills and food bills before, how hard is it going to be when most people's source of income dries up? It's going to be extremely difficult. And the politicians, in fear of their jobs, are going to start handing out cash left and right. And that's only going to make the problem worse. It's going to lead to eventually hyperinflation on the other side of this deflationary depression that we're heading into. And that is going to create massive chaos, social unrest, and instability. And I believe, again, Europe is going to be ground zero for all of this. So what does that mean? Well, the Bible tells us that a revived form of the Roman Empire will be the last days empire that conquers the entire globe. Daniel says devours the entire earth. And so, pointing to the people who conquered the temple, as we read in Daniel 9, that would state that Italy and the Roman Empire, we look at geographically where that was, it was this area where we're seeing ground zero for this energy crisis. So this sets the stage for a leader, a strong leader, to be the people demand that that strong leader come to power and fix this crisis. And so we're seeing the stage being set for the rise of the Antichrist. We're hearing calls for the building of a European Union army in order to combat, in order to defend the European continent, because they've realized in this Ukraine-Russia war scenario just how vulnerable they are and how reliant they are on the United States for their security. And so you're going to see calls for that. You're going to see calls for a single leader who can speak on behalf of the European Union with a unified voice, because as we saw before, you had a dozen different leaders all taking different positions, trying to negotiate with Vladimir Putin, pushing their own agendas. You can't be a unified bloc and do that. So there's going to be calls for, and I believe an institution of, a single person who can speak on behalf of the European Union. So all of this is setting things up for the rise of the Antichrist. We've seen in these economic situations in the past, we mentioned earlier in the week, the French Revolution came about, which gave rise to Napoleon because of this very thing, this inflation. People's cost of living was so high, they couldn't get by. And the same happened in Germany. We saw the Weimar Germany hyperinflation. Hitler tried to seize power during that, and he failed. But then he had a second opportunity when the Great Depression came, and people were more than willing to listen to his ideas at that point. They needed a strong leader. That's what they got. And I believe the world is going to be calling out for a strong leader following this massive economic crisis. And that's what they're going to get. Of course, this also leads to these central bank digital currencies that they've been telling us they are preparing to roll out. And this type of crisis is exactly what fits the bill for what they need to do to be able to roll this out. Come claim your cash so that you can afford your rent, your utilities, your groceries, the basic necessities of life. Just sign up for the central bank digital currency. And of course, that lays the foundation for the whole mark of the beast system and the government's ability to cut off all buy-sell transactions. So guys, it's happening just as we said it would happen, even though the media is saying, well, don't worry about it. It's been a mild winter, crisis averted, no problem. I wish it was that simple, but it's not. There are structural energy shortfalls in Europe that have not been fixed. They haven't been taken seriously by these politicians who are steeped in this green ideology, and they reject all fossil fuels, not just Russian fossil fuels. They want to reject all of it, of course, except what they need. They'll import that liquefied natural gas in order to get by. But ultimately, they won't open new nuclear power plants. They won't pursue every avenue they can to get the energy they need. Instead, they'd like to paper over the problem, simply print more currency, look the other way, hope the problem goes away, but it isn't going to go away. And this is eventually going to lead to a change in leadership in Europe. And I believe we could possibly see the Antichrist come out of that at some point in the future. So I don't know. What do you think? Leave your comments below. Make sure to like and share this. God willing, I'll see you tomorrow. Bye. If you want to learn more about the end times and Bible prophecy, make sure to sign up for my free monthly newsletter and get your copy of my free ebook, 7 Signs of the End Times. Just follow the link in the description to get your free book. Also, make sure to check out all of my books. Just look up Britt on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Apple iBooks, Google Books, Kobo, or anywhere books are sold. Thanks for watching today, and until next time, keep your eyes fixed on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith.